Hello everyone. Today I'm going to talk about Lobster 207. But you may be wondering, what is Lobster 207? Lobster 207 is an association or syndicate of the lobstermen living in Maine, Portland in the United States of America. Let's have a bit more of historical background first. It is 2012 and the lobstermen are still living the effects of the Great Recession in America from the year 2008, which was the biggest economic crash since the fall of the stock market and the Great Depression in the 1930s.
The lobstermen of Maine were self-employed workers, and their rights were constantly diminished. Also, they didn't have any legal protection, and there were many obstacles for their work, such as environmental regulations and decrease of the price of their products. The lobstermen of Maine were in a very bad place, and they needed to do something about it.
But let's have a little bit more economical context first. And by that we're talking about the economic sectors. The fishermen, the lobstermen, they remain in the primary sector. And the problem with the primary sector is that most of the time, even though they hard work so much, they are not well paid, they are not paid enough, and this affects their quality of life.
The lobstermen of Maine were in a very bad place, and they needed to do something about it. In the case of the lobstering business, the workers were not able to establish their own prices. They were always depending on the offers of merchants at the port. But this is the case of the primary sector because the secondary and the tertiary sectors are not as a danger as the primary, and especially in Maine where the lobstery is crucial for the overall economy. And it is also important to point out that 83% of lobster landings in the United States come specifically from Maine.
This is the story of how the people found a voice and created a unified association to protect their rights, boost their business, and overall improving their way of life. This is the story of Sully and the Maine Lobstering Union, aka Lobster 207.
In December of 2012, there was a lobsterman talking to his brother about all the problems faced within the business environment in the city of Vinyl Haven, Maine. They were talking about how the prices of the products were once valued at $3 to $4 per pound, and suddenly they were getting profits or just $1 per pound. The worst price decline in 20 years. The lobsterman also mentioned that they had to have a license provided by the Maine Department of Marine Resources because they regulated the lobster industry. But the number of available licenses was too and very limited, making it impossible for many lobstermen to do their jobs. The state and national regulations were in charge not only of limiting who could fish, but also specified where the fishing could take place. They also set the limits on types of equipment used and restricted which lobsters could be harvested based on the size of egg bearing. In addition, there were many environmental groups claiming to the state that the lobstermen were endangering the zones and the fauna of the overall environment of Maine. And because of this, the state restricted even more the fishing zones for the lobstermen.
The situation was looking very uncertain for all those within the lobstery industry, but luckily for the lobsterman of this part of the story, his brother was a worker in the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, District 4, and he suggested to meet with the machinists.
And after receiving the approval of the headquarters in Washington, D.C., Dave Sully Sullivan, in his role of business representative, met with the lobsterman in Vinyl Haven. And Sully was not alone. He was accompanied by Joel Pitcher, who was an organizer, very skilled in understanding and aligning shared interests between people on the ground. And Pitcher also came from a family of Maine lobstermen.
This specific campaign was very unusual, and that was because the lobstermen were self-employed people, and they hadn't an official moral person to bargain with. But for Sully, the reasons were very clear, and they had to give it a shot and protect the rights of these people.
In early 2013, Sully and Pitcher organized many meetings with the lobstermen, and they all shared their challenges and experiences, pointing out all the difficulties since the crash of the lobster market in 2012. The goal of these meetings was to help the lobstermen to unify and develop a strategy for building their own political and economic power, and also to understand tactically how to organize a membership base. The months passed, and by summer of the same year, the lobstermen began referring themselves as Lobster 207, which was a nickname for the International Association of Machinists Local 207. By the end of the year, the main lobstering union, aka Lobster 207, was formed. They started this whole undertaking because of the low prices, but they realized that as an official association, they could do so much more. They could be able to collectively push back against how they were being pressured by regulators, environmental groups, and many other conglomerates. During the next 5 years, Lobster 207 achieved both political and economic victories, such as the one in which they pressured legislators to oppose or support bills that could directly affect the lobstermen. They were also exempted from antitrust laws because, in the past, any kind of protest, such as laboring stoppage, would be considered illegal, and any action of this nature would be treated as criminal behavior, but not anymore. Also, the lobstermen were now able to establish and negotiate their own prices. The growing lobster industry of Maine would now be able to have a global influence and take advantage of the several free trade agreements between countries, and to contribute more with the whole alimentary industry of the country and the US overall GDP. It is now 2018, 5 years after the creation of the Maine Lobstering Union. Sully is contemplating across the waterfront from a particular pizza place in Portland, Maine. This is his 30th anniversary with the International Association of Machinists. All along his career, he has done so many things, but none as important or special as his contribution to create Lobster 207. It is important to point out that during this year, the President Donald Trump is starting his second year as president, and he's on the public eye on the whole world, waiting to see his next move. No one can predict if his decision will affect free trade agreements such as NAFTA, or if his new regulations would benefit or negatively affect the lobster industry. One only thing was certain: whatever happens, the lobstermen are unified under one voice, able to protect their rights and their way of living. As Sully analyzed the current situation, he smiles with relief, remembering the roller coaster ride he had presided over the last 5 years to support the Maine lobstermen. He wondered if this was the beginning or the end of the International Association of Machinists experimentation with self-employed and independent contract workers. But in a matter of minutes, he would have a meeting with the international president of the association, a person who could explicitly manifested his position on the matter, which was the commitment to aggressively grow and protect the contracts and careers of nearly 600,000 active and retired International Association of Machinists members, which included the whole Maine Lobstering Union.
But the direction was clear, because the future of the lobstermen was looking brighter than ever. And despite all the challenges awaiting in the future, Lobster 207, the Maine Lobstering Union, was solid, was strong, and all thanks to a collective effort and something worth fighting for. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you liked and found interesting this story, and see you again next time.